Hello and good afternoon. We're so excited that you're here. I'm Erin Frisby. I'm on the Blackbaud customer success team, and I'm excited to introduce our speakers for this next session, which is going to be awesome. Josh and Alex are both with Save the Children, which is a global movement which champions the rights of the world's 2.3 billion children. And Josh and Alex are excited to share with you how they put the power in the donor's hands. So Josh Vincent is a product manager and lead advisor user experience, and Alex Kochiss is managing director of solution architecture. So Josh and Alex, thank you so much for sharing your insights with this audience, and I'll turn it over to you.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for having us here today. I think we're excited to speak with everybody and share a little bit about this project. You introduced us, so I won't spend a ton of time on this next slide, but just to reiterate who we are and throw a little bit of contact info out there for folks who may want to follow up afterward. I'm Josh Vincent. I'm a user experience advisor and product manager with Save the Children. I oversee our usage of the Blackbaud product suite, so do a lot of work in Luminate Online as well as BBCRM. I'm here with my close colleague, Alex Kochiss, and I'll pass it over to him for a quick word.
Yeah, sure. I'm Alex Kochiss, Managing Director, Solution Architecture, purely a solution architect at heart, and been with Save the Children for going on 9 years and working with Blackbaud since day one. But my team oversees all of the products within the portfolio here at Save the Children, and Blackbaud's a big part of that. So.
Awesome. Thanks a bunch. So what we're going to talk to you about is our experience with implementing a self-service gift cancellation feature. And here's just a quick look at our agenda for the next 45 minutes. I'm going to start it off by covering what our specific goals were in doing something like this, and to go through with you a bit of our internal description and the work that we did around the project, including some really interesting constraints and considerations that we had to grapple with around gift complexity, user rights, and donor touch points. I will walk you through the user experience that we designed and built, and then I'll turn it over to Alex to speak to the solutioning side, talk through the engineering and development that went on both in our custom Luminate Online supporter center as well as in BBCRM, and all of the things that exist in between those two systems. And then we'll look at the results of the project, which I'll give you a little spoiler. We're pretty good. So hang on until the end, and we'll have some interesting things to share there. So a quick look at the goals. Really, the point of doing something like this, or I guess the origin point of something like this, was we wanted to reduce the number of phone calls and emails that were coming into our supporter experience team. We have agents who respond to donors and other constituents who call into the organization needing one thing or another. Gift cancellation, as we'll see on another slide or two here, accounts for some portion of those calls. And so offering a self-service option here would reduce those calls coming in. We also wanted to give donors this option to cancel or downgrade their gifts based on what we know about user expectations, user rights, which I will also speak to on another in a few slides. Through doing this, we also wanted to include a little, a gentle retention ask to see what would happen and look at whether that would be effective or not. Of course, we also wanted to see the impact that this would have over time on things like recurring gifts, average donation amounts. And then by introducing this new feature, of course, we wanted to minimize disruption to the rest of the online supporter experience, as well as minimizing the change impact to other Save the Children audiences, not just our donors and online constituents, but all the other folks in the organization and without it who would be impacted. So a quick look at who some of those audiences are. Obviously, supporters and site visitors, that's kind of our primary concern when we're talking about web UX, but also our support team, those agents who I mentioned, who are all in contact with our donors and supporters via chat, phone, and email. Our marketing team was a stakeholder here. They're the folks who have engagement and fundraising responsibilities and goals that are tied to the online experience. Their input was important. Our web and IT teams, which are the technical staff who support all of this work, the finance, business intelligence, data, gift processing, all of those folks, they were impacted by the introduction of this feature. So we had a lot of requirements to meet for them and kind of the downstream impacts to our system and our data when donors cancel. And then supporter account operations, who are staff managing other gifts that come from third-party platforms, not originating in Luminate or BBCRM, they were impacted as well. So a lot of different stakeholders here. We put a lot of effort into speaking with all of these groups, doing the sort of user experience research and user experience design before we ever endeavored to build anything. A quick overview of the actual description of the project. I'll kind of scan through this. It's a lot of text, but basically there are two facets to this. The scope was focused on updating the Supporter Experience Center, that's our online supporter center, as well as all of the associated backend processes to allow donors to go in and edit the amount of their gift. That's both to increase it if they choose or to reduce it if they choose down to a minimum amount. They can update their credit card information. And the new feature that we were adding was to add a gift cancellation option for single child sponsorship gifts and non-sponsorship recurring gifts. What actually fell out of scope was multi-child sponsorship recurring gifts. Those are fairly complex digital products that have a lot of complex sort of management aspects to them. And so we disqualified that from this initial release for those reasons. And we'll talk a little bit more about that too. Quick look at volume. This is based on data from 2021 and 2022, which was the time period leading up to the work. So 18% of our supporter center calls resulted in a gift cancellation. That's 18% of those actually ended up with a cancellation. There were more calls, obviously, in which cancellation was a topic, and maybe we retained the donor, or maybe we had some other outcome, but 18% of those calls were resulting in a cancel, and then less than 1% of those supporters were saved or downgraded to some other lesser recurring gift or lesser digital product. As far as site visits, only about 3% of our constituency during that time period was actually logging into our website when they came to it. But out of that 3%, majority of those users were actually looking to manage their donations in some way. So it's a large portion of that 3% that we're serving by introducing a feature like this. Getting back to some of the constraints and considerations, I mentioned multi-child sponsorships were not included here. Reason for that being those gifts are essentially a single gift amount that once it's made is then distributed into several different portions. So updating or canceling that kind of a gift has a large management effort around it and would have required a fairly complex user interface that would facilitate that task management. So we did exclude those for those reasons, and we're planning to sort of revisit that functionality potentially later this year when we pick up another release for the feature. User expectations and rights, which I also alluded to. This covers a couple of different topics, right? One of them is just expectation. And we all know, I don't know if you've ever tried to cancel a cable account or a gym membership maybe, but those cancellations can be notoriously bad user experiences for a couple of reasons. Obviously, organizations really want to retain us, right? So they can sometimes resort to overbearing retention methods. When we're talking about online functions, dark design patterns or things that are kind of intentionally set up to be confusing or hard to find or obtuse, that's a problem. And then straight up just not allowing donors or whoever your constituents may be, customers, donors, members, denying them the option outright to go in and make these kinds of decisions about their accounts. That's also something that still occurs. So we rejected any of that kind of stuff outright in favor of a straightforward and intuitive user experience that's going to let people do what they came to do. Now, the other part of that is we think it's possible, maybe even likely, that this sort of thing will become compulsory at some point as digital consumer rights evolve. What you're looking at here is a snapshot of an FTC proposal that is really strongly encouraging folks at this time to allow for easy and simple cancellation online, especially if folks signed up for your organization online. They should be able to cancel as well. So we do see this kind of trending. There have been some state level laws over the last few years. These are examples from California and Washington, where more transparent, more consumer protective digital practices are being mandated. Now, we're not lawyers. We're not here to give legal advice or official legal opinions or anything like that. But this is out there. We came across a lot of information around this in our research, and this could certainly be something that folks need to comply with broadly at some point in the future. So getting ahead of that curve, giving your users what we already know they want and need, that's a good thing to do if your organization is able to do that. And that's why we're talking about it today. A final consideration here, donor touch points. This is really about aiming to release the feature in a way that is going to minimize difficulty, not just for donors, but also for the folks in our organization. And there's maybe 4 points to touch on here. Minimizing rework for development and engineers. Multiple releases means potentially, rewriting and reorganizing this function. We wanted to try to avoid that since this was our first introduction of the function. Wanted to keep it simple, try to get it out there in one release if possible. Avoiding donor disorientation is another big one. When you introduce features and then they consistently change, that can be a problem, and it can cause donors to need to learn or relearn how to do things that they've maybe just figured out. We wanted to try to avoid that if possible. And then we wanted to avoid advertising the feature more than was necessary. Now, obviously, again, we're avoiding dark patterns. We're not trying to hide it. We're not trying to confuse people, but we also don't want to draw undue attention to the fact that donors can now go and cancel. If we had multiple releases related to that feature that required communications to our online constituents every time that it changed, then we're simply reminding them over and over again, hey, you can easily go cancel your gift. And that's not such a smart thing to do. So we wanted to try to avoid that as much as possible too. On to the user experience. And I might walk through this fairly quickly so that I can give Alex plenty of time to talk through how all of this works. But step one is very straightforward. You would go to our website and log in. We've got a login link in the top nav that takes you to a standard screen. Once you're in, you land on the home screen of our Supporter Experience Center, from which you are shown a card that outlines your recent giving history, summarizes a bit of information. There's a link at the top of that card to manage my giving. Once you click on that, you're taken to a screen where you can manage all of your individual gifts. This shows really everything that you've done. If you have active sponsorships or other active recurring gifts, they're all displayed here with their amount, their payment type, most recent or upcoming transactions, that kind of stuff. Here within this list of gifts, you can choose to manage an individual gift by clicking the Manage Gift link, under which there are 3 options that then display. And these options might be slightly different depending on what kind of a gift it is. So for single child sponsorship and non-sponsorship recurring gifts, donors can edit their amount. Again, that means they can increase it. We love it when that happens. They can also decrease it down to a certain minimum requirement. I think that's $5 or $10 or $15 or something like that. But they can adjust that up and down. They can update their gift or they can update their credit card information if it is an existing credit card gift, or if it's a statement gift or something that's not paid with a credit card, they can switch to a credit card. And then the new feature which we put there is the cancel gift feature. Now, if it is one of those multi-child sponsorship gifts that I mentioned were out of scope for this release, they can still update to credit card, they can still switch to credit card, but the rest of the options that are available to them here are really require some assistance. So we have a more options link for those gifts that prompts a light box or a modal, which provides some instructions on what they can do next. There is an online form that we set up where folks who want to manage these kinds of gifts can go and request either a reduction or a cancellation or whatever other kind of adjustment they need to make. They can request that online, and then someone from our supporter experience team will follow up with them, or they can call us on the phone, which they've always been able to do and can still do if that's their preferred method. So if you are canceling an eligible gift and you choose that option, what you would then see is another light box or modal, and this is that gentle retention ask that I noted. What we say here is, hey, just as a reminder, if you're thinking about canceling, you can actually reduce your gift amount if it's a matter of affordability, or you just need to kind of change because you have other things in your life. Whatever the case may be, we would love to keep you as a donor. So consider this option. There's some mission-related imagery and text here, some of which we have plans to, I think in future releases, work to personalize this as much as possible so that it's not general content, but content that is specific to maybe the donor's history or their expressed issue affinities or interests that they have regarding our programming. There's a lot of potential to test things out here and kind of see what works. But they have a prominent action here to, yes, go and reduce that gift amount instead of canceling. That would return them to their Manage My Giving screen with that edit gift amount option enabled so that they could put in whatever new amount they're comfortable with and save that. And then their gift has been updated to that amount. Or they can continue to cancel. And we don't provide any further argument. You know, if they say no, cancel my gift, that's all that happens. And we take them next to an online form where they both confirm that their gift information is correct, that they're canceling the gift that they chose to or that they intended to. And then we ask them to provide a cancellation reason. And that is really for coding purposes, so that when this cancellation gets fed into our database, there is a trackable cancellation code already attached to it that feeds into reporting and other automations that we have. Now, if the list of dropdowns here does not include a reason that the donor is looking for, they have another option as well where they can write and tell us whatever they like to about why they're canceling. And those feed into our Voice of Donor reports ultimately as well with the supporter experience team, with the UX team. You know, we pay attention to those and what folks are telling us. But for ease of use, there is a drop down and it has some of our common cancellation reasons there for folks to easily choose from. So once they've done that, they submit the cancellation and it's a done deal. They're returned to their supporter experience center from there, where they will start to see some notifications. There's a large banner at the top of the supporter experience center where all sorts of notifications might display depending on what the donor's been doing. Cancellation would apply there. So we would have a note on their recent cancellation that would show up in that space. And then in those lists of individual gifts that we saw earlier, there would also be a state change on the gift in the list. So if it was something like an individual child sponsorship that they could cancel on their own, that would then show as canceled in the list. Or if it was one of those multi-child gifts that required further support, there would just be sort of a pending alert on that gift noting that they had submitted a request around it and that someone will be reaching out to them for further conversation there. There's also, autoresponders and other parts of the supporter experience that we won't get into on this presentation. But there are other UX aspects that follow a cancellation. One of the other web-related ones that I will note quickly is just the introduction of this feature required that we make a lot of content updates around the front end portion of the website. So we have several pages on gift frequently asked questions. There is a how to cancel page, various other pages, that have instructions on how to manage your account or how to manage your relationship with the organization. All of that was part of the UX and sort of content and design work that went into this, and something that your organization would also need to think about, if you were to do something similar. With that, and I think we're right on time at about 20 minutes, I'm going to hand it over to Alex to talk through the technical piece and let you know how it is that we did this.
Yeah, awesome. My turn now, Josh. So, but before getting into the tech, I can't overstate, the power of good UX. So having that deep understanding of the customer and, the partnership between UX and solution design to really make this whole experience sing. So I want to give credit to you, as that talented, passionate UX designer, but also Josh is somebody who's really open to compromise. And, oftentimes we could do, anything and it's really just a matter of kind of costs and time, but understanding that value creation, is a balancing act that we struck well on this one. So even with that balance and compromise, there's certainly a lot of things happening, updating amounts and switching from statement to credit card, or updating credit cards, or decreasing, hopefully increasing things, surfacing a whole bunch of data, and not just Luminate data, because that's a subset of the whole. So there's definitely a lot of pieces over the next 20 minutes that I'm going to try to tactically walk through, and showcase how those things fit together. We'll talk about each component of the build, from custom endpoints to leveraging AWS, customizing our Blackbaud CRM instance, and finally, as Josh mentioned, the multi-sponsorship use case, which certainly adds some technical challenge. And given this is BB Dev Days, the material itself can be a bit dense, but I will do my best to, try to break it up and apply some principles to everyday life scenarios to add a little bit of color. So, but with that said, let's jump in. So before we get into the weeds on the solution, I wanted to really start at the 30,000 foot level. So, these are our principles, the North Star, and it all aligns with the architecture. So, service-oriented architecture, service-oriented framework, it really sits on the premise that services are, independently developed, deployed, maintained, and yet they interact together in some cohesive application. So those basic principles that you're seeing, are guiding us on the design. From loosely coupled services, you'll see that upcoming with the BBIS web service, but essentially what that is different services for different tasks, and they can be independently updated without affecting other components within the system. Interoperability, you're going to again see that upcoming with web service, via RESTful HTTPS. And regardless of the underlying platform, the web service that we built here is really easy to understand and integrate with, and it leverages the existing architecture of the web. From a reusability standpoint, you're going to hear about these custom endpoints, as well as some operations and custom things that we've done in Blackbaud CRM that can certainly be reused in different ways or in different applications altogether. From a scalability standpoint, you're going to learn all about, our AWS hosting for a security reason, based on a proxy server. But it also enables us to meet demand and scale the application in a cost-effective way. So when we see surges in traffic, it's really underscoring the performance at scale. So, but as you see on the right, all of the pieces are interconnected, and we will dig into the details with the BBIS BBCRM web service first. So the question, or I guess challenge, is how we can access data in real time from each constituent record out of Blackbaud CRM to allow for these cancellations or gift adjustments. So that's the overarching goal, but there's way more use cases than that. We need to provide enough details, enough metadata against that user or against that gift to make that interaction meaningful. So the use cases here tell a much wider story than just cancellation, but really cancellations at the end of the line. So what we went forth with to implement was a BBIS BBCRM web service, which allows for that information to be exchanged in near real time. So this is really foundational endpoints that give metadata, or giving history, data lists, or giving our constituent attributes, or sponsorship related information, and both in the get and put function. So we can grab data, and we also can feed data back to BBCRM when somebody actually triggers that update. So what you see is, on the right side there is all those needs are being met in this functional way. Unique endpoints returning JSON objects with an array of scope data for each constituent. It's easy to parse programmatically, easy to read on the client side, and really widely supported. So let's take a look at those. If you take a look at those use cases, and see any that might apply to your constituent base, maybe not the sponsorship ones, but perhaps the constituents or smart fields. Think about if your constituents have value knowing or interacting with any of that data. And I think if so, then endpoints like these, would be, right for you to, position yourself to surface that data, very easy to maintain, expand to new fields, and, straightforward for the user to consume. So we just went over, the web service piece at a high level, and it does what we want. It gets that user data, and it surfaces the data bidirectionally, allows it to exchange data. So what's next? Why a proxy, or what is a proxy? So I decided to kind of start at a high level, and we will dig much deeper. But using this bank teller metaphor, we all have bank accounts, and we don't go into the bank and just go grab what we think is ours from the vault, or what is ours from the vault. Unfortunately, in the world of banks, as well as in the world of technology, there are bad actors. So we, in this case with the bank, we use a bank teller who's essentially acting as a proxy, requiring identification, some type of unique PIN number or an ID, and we essentially do the same here. So the proxy or bank teller is someone who's accessing that vault of information, or that vault of money in this case, on your behalf. And they serve as that intermediary who protects the assets that don't belong to you, but still provides you with the service based on your identity. So now keeping that in mind, let's go into the next slide and see how it applies to the BBIS web service. So if you were looking closely a couple slides ago, you'd see that the parameters are scoped to a constituent GUID or a revenue GUID. So then why do we need that proxy? And although we're scoping the request to a specific record, there's still no public-facing API. So there's only that admin API, which is a constraint, and essentially just a dangerous level of interaction to give to an end user. So in response to that constraint, we developed that LO BBIS proxy, which serves as more than just a technical requirement. It's really a strategic asset that allows the general public to interact with Save the Children data, sensitive internal data in a really controlled and secure way. So it's the intermediary, it's the bank teller. It allows, after the user verifies their identity, receives some unique identifier off of their Luminate profile, and then we can then make subsequent calls to CRM and BBIS endpoints. So we'll get into a little bit more details on the technical aspects of the proxy and kind of the sequencing in this more modern web architecture. But overall, the application itself is, Laravel PHP hosted in an EC2 instance in AWS. And it's all the sensitive data, the keys, the configs are stored in a secure S3 bucket, deployments, maintenance, as well as certificate management, elastic load balancing, for surges in incoming traffic, and Route 53 for health checks and monitoring, really build this complete solution. So so now on to the next slide to see some of the sequencing between the systems. All right, so a quick overview of what you're looking at. So the user on the left side with the Save the Children logo, the AWS proxy, and the BBCRM and Luminate Online box at the top, and the sequence of events between all four of those pieces. So first, the user initiates the login request to Luminate Online, and Luminate authenticates those credentials. And then once the user is authenticated, Luminate generates a nonce. So a nonce, a one-time number, something unique, it's, random string that can't easily be guessed and is meant to be used only exactly once. So it's that temporary proof of authentication, and it expires after the use and it can't be used again. So it ensures that all authentication sessions are uniquely secure. Luminate Online then sends the nonce back to the user's browser in a separate cookie. And then you could see a series of confirmations and session management, including some back channel verification to check the authentication against the user state for some added layers of security there. The Luminate record is also stored in the proxy session, so the proxy then can make calls to BBCRM directly to grab scoped data against that user. And you can see really at the bottom here is that the get data and the return data, the put data, communicating between the proxy and BBCRM, and then returning the data ultimately to the left side and to the user. So all of this kind of sequence is underscored by security. It's obviously sponsorship and child data, but also sponsorships, PII, financial information, so of utmost importance. And Save the Children with consultants came in and decided that we needed to take these additional measures to avoid any replay attacks where that nonce value is being validated directly, and we had to take that steps here to ensure that a bad actor isn't trying to reuse a nonce and kind of gain on unauthorized access in any way. So all right, on the next side, we'll kind of bring it to a layer up here, and hopefully looking at the chart, you can recognize some of the terms highlighted in the yellow box. We talked about the proxy, in depth. We talked about the BBIS and BBCRM web service, the security, the authentication, the architecture and why. And now we're going to move into the right half to tie all the pieces together. So it's the same image on top and just a different yellow box now. But to familiarize yourself with the diagram, the user is logging in there. It's calling the endpoints, AWS. The supporter center in the middle is really where somebody is using that light box, which was mentioned by Josh, to make that cancellation or update the gift amount. And then you can see within the kind of yellow highlighted area that there's various other parts to the solution, which include, the survey API on the Luminate side to collect and store the data, Luminate data operations, to automate and pull the data, custom batch types that we built in CRM to ingest the data and stored procedures to help orchestrate that. BBIS and CRM endpoints. We're now going to be showcasing using the put to return some of that data, and then ultimately a helper app for that specialized multi-sponsorship, kind of multi-gift single transaction use case. So let's jump into the update amount piece. So quick diagram overview. Starting on the left, the front end, there's some constraints, as Josh mentioned, with the minimum amount and in the light box. So, maybe that's $10 or $15 is that minimum amount constraint that's set. But as we kind of talked about earlier, the user itself doesn't care, where they originated from. They were really only looking for a cohesive, consistent experience. So, we know, and I'm sure for many folks, Luminate Online is not your only recurring gift, platform. So we have kind of two endpoints that are listed here, both for Blackbaud CRM, serving as our system of record, as well as Luminate Online for those that originated in Luminate Online. So when the user, from the left, updates their gift amount and it originates in Luminate, then we use the CR recurring gift API to update the amount, as well as always updating the amount through those custom BBIS, BBCRM endpoints. Every gift, is cloned within the Blackbaud environment as a database of record. So, it has to be updated in both places if the gift originated within Luminate Online. So it's relatively straightforward here. A few parameters pass, the pledge ID or the recurring gift ID, and the updates happen kind of near instantaneously and keep both of Luminate and the backend systems in sync. And once we see that 200 response, we then kind of trigger the notification that the process is complete. So next slide, Josh, is so last slide, updating amount, and now we're into the cancellation component where we leverage the Survey API, which is something that's out of the box within the Luminate library. Survey API, really works well. It allowed for automation of data collection, and you submit it, obviously programmatically, so it handles, easily handles, different data inputs. It's a pretty versatile tool that with an API key and a couple of parameters, and you're pretty much utilizing it. So the survey is called via the lightbox that Josh showcased earlier. And there is a nuance here and displayed within the image that there are two surveys that are used, one for multi-gifts and one for single gifts. But I think for now we can focus really just on the single gift and then get back to multi-gift. So when that user makes a cancellation, the information is posted via the Survey API, which also includes relevant metadata associated with the recurring gift. So using the data that's retrieved from that BBIS, BBCRM endpoints, that's where that data is also carried through as a part of that survey, so we can essentially tie it back to a unique gift. We also have a custom date field which matches the user's cancellation event, and again, some of those notifications that Josh was discussing earlier are triggered off of that notification event. So surfacing some type of notification in X days from when that cancellation event actually took place, and so you can see it, at the end part of this diagram, everything is, that survey is being posted to Luminate Online, and in a simplified way, it's then being, kind of ETL and pulled into an SFTP. So part of that pull is something that we use our Luminate Online data integration specialists to, help pull that survey data out of Luminate Online and get it ready essentially for consumption into BBCRM. So we'll get into that on the next slide a little bit more. So now that data sits in Luminate, it has to get out into an area that is accessible for other systems. So at this point, we know the Luminate data integration team can do this type of automation. They can pull that survey data for the prior day and basically output the questions and data fields that we need, and then drop it in an SFTP where we can automate that consumption into Blackbaud CRM, as much as possible. So in the drop is really every question that's on the survey, and then a bunch of kind of hidden questions from the user that's not important for them, but from our end-to-end processing is certainly important. And then our the LODI team do all the transformations to get that data ready for that consumption. So but I think next up we're going to look into the import and the custom batch and the sort procedure, which kind of rounds out that fully automated end-to-end cycle. So before we get into the batch piece, we have a stored procedure in CRM that we created that essentially sets the file name on the import process table to the current date plus a file identifier. So since we know that the file dropped on the file dropped from the LODI team to the SFTP, runs on a routine, and sets a known syntax, including the current date prefix, we can then assume the file name on the CRM side. So, and then we after we assume, we can then set that file name prior to running the queue job which includes the import process. So I think that's a lot of words actually for saying that we basically set the import job name on what we expect to be in the SFTP, and then it's sequenced where the file is dropped to the SFTP prior to the global change running, and then prior to the import job running, which takes all the cancellation IDs and actually performs that action. But it was for us a simple way to have automation, without being constrained by updating or overwriting a static file within the SFTP every night. So the last piece we're heading into now is the CRM custom batch components, and I'm not entirely sure on the audience or future VOD or video on demand audience, but if they're CRM or LO users, but at a high level of custom batch in BBCRM is something that is tailored data entry that allows us to meet specific needs for things that are not covered within the standard out-of-the-box batch processes. They're really helpful when you're trying to capture data that doesn't fit neatly into predefined formats, and since there isn't a format or isn't a batch type for taking a revenue ID and canceling and taking a cancel code and a revenue ID and performing a cancellation in CRM. That's where we had to create that data form and the sort procedure to insert the table, validate inputs, all the error handling, the batch type configs, for the processing logic, the integration behaviors, and then the table spec to define the structure of the tables and the views. So so all this said is we end up with something that's fully automated, and the stored procedure tied to a custom batch takes that GUID value and some other additional information on the gift and essentially performs the cancellation action in CRM. So really from dropping the file SFTP, setting the import job name in a custom stored procedure, and then leveraging this custom batch, we're really no touch at all to this whole process kind of running end to end. And finally, I left I think the most complex for last. Something we deferred, as Josh said, is we have a use case that may be more unique to Save the Children, but at a time you can sponsor up to 10 children in a single transaction in Luminate Online. So what that means is you can have 3 children in the example at $30 for each sponsorship, which is a one-time gift in Luminate Online stored at $90. But we're splitting that in CRM into 3 different applications by child. So that makes it really tricky when we're surfacing that data back up to the front end, because all recurring gifts surface in a separate array. But we determine that we can group them by the pledge ID and then conditionalize the functionality. So, so they're not able to essentially update the amount, because that gets a little bit tricky when, $90 becomes $80 and it doesn't equally split. But we realize that they still need, to be able to cancel, and hopefully that doesn't occur. But as Josh described earlier, it was still a user need. So to build that functionality, kind of in the interim for a use case that's fairly small. I mean, it's only a small percentile of our donors fall into this multi-sponsorship single gift transaction criteria. We decided to store that data via the survey API, but also directly fire that off to our reps within the call center, essentially, to service that gift directly. So it's not an automated piece, but it allows for it allows for the service reps on our team to essentially receive that notification that one of these people who is trying to cancel multiple sponsorships in a single click, and gives them that opportunity to really reach out to them and understand or potentially even save some part of that gift. So now finally, and I think almost 1 minute late, so we're gonna wrap this up pretty quick, but flash forward 1 year. This isn't a pilot amount of data. This is really statistically, significant numbers. Decreased by 30 to 40 calls a day. If you do, some math, that's 10,000 plus calls a year. And so it's really a lot of time. And thinking about that in terms of time, that's really nearly, half a full-time job that's saved. So, but beyond the user desire here, and the Josh mentioned some of the potential legislative pushes, we've also seen some really remarkable numbers. First off, and this is again a year's worth of data, is no spike in cancellation, and actually a gradual decrease since launch. And obviously there's multiple variables that factor into that, but it's safe to say that self-service cancellation did not drive additional cancellations. And we also see that there's a 20% chance of saving donors who are attempting to cancel. So this tells a story for great UX, some compelling marketing and imagery, right, is leading to more decreases and even some increases as well. So donors hit that workflow, maybe they're attempting to cancel, that light box pops up and they either abandon or lower the gift amount, which is ultimately a huge win for us at Save the Children. So that said, ending on a good note is always preferred in my book. So would love to move into more questions, any feedback at all. I know Josh and I love this stuff. We're excited that we had the opportunity here to share this story, and hopefully some of the nuggets of information was useful for you in your organization.
Thanks a bunch, Alex. I know there were a couple of things that came in through the Q&A while we were speaking, and it looks like Erin may have followed up with each of those. Some questions around, how an organization would do this without a lot of dev resources. A similar question about setting this up within NXT or Razor's Edge. Any thoughts on that while we're here, or is that something we should encourage the Blackbaud team to follow up about? Cool. Well, we'll let Erin follow up with those. Awesome. Well, I don't see any further questions, and I know that we are we're over time by a few minutes. So, Erin, I'll turn it back over to you.
Thank you, Josh and Alex. Thank you, Josh and Alex, so much for sharing your insights. And just a kind reminder, I'm going to launch the survey this time. Please remember to complete the survey. The more surveys you enter, you get yourself into an opportunity to win something from the Print Your Cause.
Yes, please.
Products. So please do that. And remember to leave this session, go back to, after you've done the survey, go back to your My Agenda and go to the next session. Thank you all so much.
Awesome. Thank you, Erin. Thanks, Josh. Thanks, everybody.